Mr. President, I've introduced 12 bills against President Biden's vaccine mandate. Now, most of these bills should have been supremely non-controversial. Some of the bills would have made sure that the exemptions President Biden announced were actually efficacious in the final mandate. Another bill would have made sure that the government didn't vaccinate children without the consent of their parents. And yet another would have provided transparency to the American people on exactly how their tax dollars are being used in this area. Lamentably, each time I asked that one of these bills pass this body, one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle objected. They determined that legislation protecting religious, medical, and moral exceptions to the mandate were not helpful. They decided the American people do not deserve to understand how their tax dollars are funding research or COVID relief. They declared that laws protecting parents' rights to make the best decisions for their kids were somehow unnecessary. On each of these issues, the American people, of course, beg significantly to differ. Americans don't appreciate it when their government takes decisions out of their hands. And as elections this week showed, parents want a voice in their children's education, and they certainly want to be respected when it comes to medical decisions involving and affecting their children as directly as this one does. Crippling inflation and polling data on Americans' economic outlook shows that people want government to be more responsible and more transparent in how it oversees their tax dollars and how it spends them. Those on the other side of the aisle who have objected perhaps aren't getting that particular message. And how tragic that is. I've heard from hundreds of Utahns in recent days who are at risk of losing their livelihoods under the mandate. Many of these individuals are military service members and first responders. Others are key workers. Many have legitimate medical or religious reasons not to be vaccinated. But each one of them is an everyday American. These are mothers and fathers. They live in our communities. They're people we call friends and neighbors. And in today's economy, all too many of them are struggling just to get by. Forcing them out of work will put an unimaginable strain on them, on their families, and on their economy, and on our economy, at a time when they can't afford to face additional strain, certainly not one imposed by the federal government. Additionally, I've learned from countless businesses that are worried about keeping their doors open should the mandate require them to fire key members of their workforce, that this just isn't tolerable. These businesses are already under tremendous strain due to the supply chain crisis and inflation and the labor shortage. They fear that they'll be unable to operate should the mandate take effect. Every American, every single American would suffer if these key industries were to shut down. Now, some might say that these impacts are far away. Others still might claim that because the mandate has not yet taken effect, these impacts aren't real or worth worrying about today. I don't think that's true. In fact, nothing could be further from the truth. Now, it is true that President Biden's vaccine mandate is yet to be officially published in the Federal Register. However, it will be tomorrow. The unpublished version of the mandate can now be found as of a few hours ago. And here's some of what it entails. If employers have 100 or more employees, they must ensure that their workers are either fully vaccinated against COVID-19 by December 5th, or that the workers test negative for COVID at least once a week by January 4th. If an employer has an employee that has yet to be vaccinated, President Biden is requiring the employer to pay workers for the time it takes to get vaccinated and provide sick leave for workers to recover from any side effects. And what happens if businesses don't comply? Well, President Biden has threatened them with a nearly $14,000 fine per violation, per person, per day. This is an administrative nightmare and nothing short of it. If employees don't want to be vaccinated against COVID-19, then they must pay for the testing. American workers will be on the hook, and it's not something most Americans can afford. Mr. President, seeing that we have a vote schedule approaching, I ask unanimous consent that Senator Peters and I be able to speak for a period of time not to exceed an additional 5 minutes to complete our remarks.
Is there objection? Without objection.
So today I'm offering a bill that would help with this situation. My No Forced Vaccination for COVID-19 Act would prevent the President of the United States or any executive branch agency from issuing a general vaccine mandate, including a mandate that requires an individual to be vaccinated or undergo periodic testing. It would end this extraordinary nightmare for millions of Americans and keep businesses. It would put this sorry, mean, cruel saga to an end. Mr. President, the people of Utah and the United States will rest easy if this bill passes. We'd be able to focus on encouraging vaccination in reasonable, acceptable, constitutional ways. I think this is what we all want. Because ultimately, I believe in these vaccines. I'm fully vaccinated. I've encouraged everyone around me to be vaccinated. I believe these vaccines are helping to protect millions of Americans from the harms of COVID. What's not helping Americans is President Biden's mandate. We can fix that today. That's why I'm encouraging my colleagues to support this bill.